So I want to give you a heads up if you choose to watch this video, because it touches upon some subject matter which may be troubling to some, such as fantasies of self-harm and some substance abuse. My aim in making this video was to portray the influence of Beethoven on the early 19th century Romanticism and the Gothic. And while I don't agree with some of the critics who deemed Gothic literature too dangerous for women readers, I can, from my own experience of my married life, see where they were coming from. I get why they were afraid. Because the disintegration of my relationship with my husband was owing in part to Beethoven's music. Mind you, Beethoven wasn't the only culprit. Virginia Woolf had a large part to play in that as well. But as painful as all of that was, it was necessary. And I thank Beethoven and Virginia Woolf every day for my awakening. So I just wanted to throw that out there. This video might not be for everybody, and I might take it down in a few days because I share some very personal things and some of my writing from my diaries of the past and some photos that I took during that time. But I'm a little scattered. So anyway, I just wanted to warn you if you were just hoping for a lighthearted Gothic video. All right, hope you enjoy.
Do you recognize anyone?
I can't see anybody.
Hi guys, Rachel here. How is everyone? So today we went to Symphony Hall to see Boston Symphony perform Beethoven's 8th and 9th symphonies. So first off, I'm so wound up. So we'll see if I can do this. I was beyond excited that I was crying before they even began to play. And when I say crying, I wasn't like sobbing and creating a scene and disrupting other viewer listeners. I was trying my damnedest to hold back my tears. And if you've ever been in that situation, you know it's the worst, because your nose runs and you're using muscles in your back and in your chest and everything, like keep it all together. Oh, I wish I wasn't like that. My mother said I've always been that way. But I just feel so lucky to be here, to be able to witness the Boston Symphony in person. They're just an amazing orchestra, and it was everything that I hoped it would be, because of course I've listened to tons of recordings over the years, especially of the 9th Symphony, and I'm not partial to all of them, and it was just the right tempo and phrasing, and it was just, oh my gosh, just gorgeous. And it also proved to be a carryover from Gothlit November. I mean, maybe that shouldn't be a big surprise to many of you because I can't stop talking about it. But I remember our first run of Gothlit November, Bailey and I were talking about trying to come up with some music playlists. And my thoughts first went to Beethoven. When I was in my early 20s, Beethoven was my drinking buddy. You know, while I was trying to puzzle out the mysteries of the universe and the human heart, he was even reflected in nature for me, which also shouldn't come as a surprise. He was in the sea, the trees, especially storms. For me, He's the heart of the romanticism of the early 19th century. All that unbridled emotion, which I could really tap into and connect with, especially while suffering from a broken heart and maybe having a couple of drinks by oneself, as one does, maybe. Maybe you can relate to that. And then I decided I would conjure up spirits of another sort in the form of Beethoven. And while we were sitting in the concert hall today, I mentioned to my daughter that this music we were going to hear was from Percy Shelley's time, because, you know, he was a contemporary, and she's writing a biography on him for a school project, which you may or may not know if you've seen some of my other videos. How cool is that? And then this is really cool. So this is another reason why it ties into the Gothic, because as you know, I mentioned Romanticism, the Romanticism of the early 19th century. And that movement is very difficult to discern from the Gothic. And in my opinion, there's really no need for it, because most of these authors who were writing romantic works, Gothic works, they weren't labeling it. Or maybe some of them were trying to stay away from the Gothic, yet they were using Gothic elements. There's really no need to get very much into it now, but another way that this ties into the Gothic is that I was reading the program notes, and this is really cool. I stumbled upon an article that mentioned E.T.A. Hoffmann, who I read recently for the recent Gothlit November Challenge, The Sandman and some other stories. He also wrote The Nutcracker. Anyway, I had read Hoffmann for Gothlit November. So what I read was that the early Romantics claimed Beethoven as their poster boy of sorts for their anti-rational movement. And it was owing to a review by Hoffmann of Beethoven's Fifth, which appeared in a 2-page article in a magazine. And this said article aided in Beethoven's fame and longevity. It said also that the origins of the narrative regarding Beethoven's transcendence and sublime character can be traced to this article by Hoffmann, which I haven't read. But is this to say that I wouldn't have heard all of this for myself while listening to his music had it not been for Hoffmann? I can't say that that's true, because I've never read the article by Hoffmann. I'd never heard of it before. I knew that he was a lover of music and composed a bit himself. But yeah, it's fascinating nonetheless. So I love classical music. You may or may not have seen my video going over my favorite classical music albums. If you're interested, I may or may not remember to provide a link down below if you want to go check that out. It was a fun video to make. But there's a lot of composers that I love. Bach and Stravinsky, Schubert, so many. And I can't say for certain that like I love Beethoven any more than the rest of them, but I will say out of all of them, while listening to their works, Beethoven is the one that I find myself, while I'm listening to his works, wanting to know his mind and what he was thinking when he wrote these works. And that's what I was delving into as someone in my early 20s and going through just the trials and tribulations of that time and having your heart broken, being disappointed by people, you know, discovering all the nuances of character, and also going through an existential crisis and struggling with realizing that a lot of your thinking is conditioned, and realizing that maybe you have to break with certain beliefs that you don't really believe in anymore, yet also still trying to cling on to something. I remember I was reading a lot of Tolstoy, but also Freud. And I remember Freud was necessary, but that really contradicted a lot of the things that my mother believed and brought me up on. And yet I was still searching for the sublime, which you can definitely find in Beethoven's works. And I had written a very embarrassing, I don't even know if you would call it an essay or what it was, but it was all about that. And struggling with the idea of evolution, and Beethoven played a large part, but it was a fun piece. I'll never share it here, it's too embarrassing. I did come across a couple of things that maybe I can share. So in my journal from, I don't know, about 14 years ago, I wrote Beethoven, Symphony No. 6, second movement. And I'm swooning. I told you, you are the best drinking pal I've ever known. I understand we couldn't possibly see eye to eye on all things. Perhaps I even secretly resent you at times. What is that all about? You're a man of your time, and I of mine. Yet there is something which resonates with my soul, and it's not as prominent in any other composer's works. Mozart is the greatest, it's true. I find myself thinking about him just as often as you, yet his genius is more often than not at the forefront of the work. But with you, Beethoven, it's strange. I want to reach out to you. Your earlier works are full of passion, longing, sultry even. The Kreutzer Sonata to this day leaves me at the brink of desperation, anguish. I could be in the most complacent of moods, feeling pleased with where I am in life. I'm disenchanted with the world and proud of it too. And then the Kreutzer Sonata comes up on shuffle. I'm taken in. So there's that. And then this is from 2017. I was writing about my past. Exploring Beethoven's piano sonatas. It opened avenues of discovery. Imagine, I'd been a collector of classical music for some 10 years now, and was still discovering new loves. But it wasn't just the music I learned to analyze. My soul was under examination as well. This time, my madness descended upon me in the fall. Perhaps it was in consequence of the excitement I experienced after forming new friendships, but I blame Beethoven. I wandered round for days with the Tempest Sonata on repeat. It was the harbinger of the chaos to come. I remember sitting at an old dive bar in Portsmouth while my husband watched the Philadelphia Eagles on TV. I was staring at a beat-up antique mirror which hung on a dark red wall and thought how it belonged on a ship of some sort, while the tempest beat on in my pulse. I began daydreaming, no, fantasizing, the first time I'd allowed myself to do so, or even needed to. I fantasized all day and night of an old mansion by the sea, storm clouds rolling in, windows wide open to invite the sea breeze in. And there, across the dark room, another being entered, and he saw me, whoever he was. Look at me. I want you to see me. I want you to see me. As the Tempest Sonata played on and on and on, relentlessly, relentlessly. The fantasy made me blush, yet I perpetuated it for some time. It was my guilty pleasure or torment. And then spring came, and like a corpse, I burst. Whatever harmony existed between us began to disintegrate. I was listening to Beethoven and reading books on existentialism, and these things, I believe, prompted dreams. My awareness came back to me. I see it now, presented to me as a gift, a pearl of perfect iridescence, a result of layer upon layer of epiphany, so luminous at night when I could not sleep. All at once, it seemed, the lines of reality were blurred. I remember sitting in that lonely sunlit room, pausing from my book to gaze out the window into the street as I shed my conventionality, strand by strand. A soul laid bare, I thought, as I continued to gaze out the window. A soul laid bare. It has tentacles. Quick, give it a sitar or a violin. Day by day, I went into myself more and more, driving through Boston with my husband, daughter in the back seat, a gold sedan in front of us carrying an older couple pulling into a gas station. It's all a lie, I thought. I was frantic. It's all a lie. They're all living a lie. The daily motions of life. What's the point? What's the sense in carrying them out? I knew the truth. Only now, I can't recall what it was made me panic. My mind was racing. My pulse had gone mad. Walking through Boston, crossing a bridge, the skyline was presented to me against a perfectly blue backdrop. Does anything lie beyond those buildings, or is it a facade? A picture. Build it up and tear it down, and build it up once again. My lips began to murmur the phrase which kept repeating in my head. My husband was grumbling what was the matter with me. I was functioning, of course. I had to, as a mother, only I was not there. I had gone far, far away. We're at the old dive bar in Portsmouth again for another Eagles game, and I am very lonely. Depression enters, sits across from me, settles in, straightening its tie, and makes itself quite at home. Thoughts, idle thoughts, of throwing myself into the sea flit through my mind, silly fancies which carried little conviction. All the same, I chanced to look down at the butter knife which lay before me, and reflected there in red were 4 letters which read, Exit. I had to cover my mouth with my hand to suppress the laugh in my throat. Exit. The knife was aligned just so as to reflect the exit sign. How does one end oneself with a butter knife? Oh my God, where's the bathroom? I need privacy as I'm about to explode into hysterics. I swear I'll leave the butter knife behind. There is beauty in restraint, I used to say in those days. There is beauty in restraint, for certes. As for myself, I've come unhinged. In my mind's eye, I equated the phrase with the shaft of doors, near the sea, in a garden by the sea. Violent gusts of wind beat the doors on their rusty hinges with much vehemence. Behind each door, a woman's voice, women's voices, wailing, grieving, laughing. So anyway, that might have been a bit too personal, but these writings were all inspired primarily by Beethoven, listening to a lot of Beethoven. I guess if you think of the reception of Gothic literature in its heyday, there were many critics who found reading Gothic literature to be dangerous, especially for women, because maybe it got them to think for themselves or to wish for something more. And Beethoven definitely did that for me. So on that note, I might have to add this to my TBR for this year. Beethoven, a biography by Maynard Solomon. I also have the Mozart one, which I have to read. So it's been some time, I believe, since I've delved into any works about music. I've read Beethoven's letters, but that was quite a few years ago now, probably 10 years or more. Anyway, speaking of Beethoven, I had a blast this past year with Gothlit November and creating music playlists for the challenge for anyone who's interested. And I created 2, and one of them is called Goth for Romantics or Gothic for Romantics, and that one is all classical. And the other playlist is tons of fun too. Had a blast with that. Anyway, I just felt so inspired from today's performance of the Boston Symphony, and I'm hoping to hear more soon. Maybe some of this resonates with you. Maybe it was a little bit too personal, but I just felt too inspired not to share. And I'm back again with some notes of sorts for you. So I hope I wasn't too scattered. It was quite impromptu, that video. So I don't know how cohesive that was. I want to mention, though, I'm not the first to warn of the dangers regarding the effect of Beethoven's music on the listener. Just read Tolstoy's The Kreutzer Sonata, which actually, now that I think of it, that work is quite Gothic. So if you haven't heard of it, go check it out. Anyway, I know I kept referring to the contemporary critics' reception of Gothic fiction in my video. They weren't speaking of romantic composers. But see, to drive my point home, I wasn't reading Gothic literature in those days. I'm referring to the journal entries that I was reading aloud to you. The journal from 2017, the excerpts I was reading, in those days, in 2017, I was writing about my past, covering the time span of, I don't know, like 2012 to 2014, something like that, and the disintegration of my marriage. And I've said before, when thinking of Gothic literature, a lot of my favorite Gothic works bring to mind the music of Beethoven, and a lot of the Gothic authors, romantic authors, which can be difficult to discern from. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely a difference between some of these works. There's definitely different genres. You could say maybe Gothic horror, romantic Gothic, and so on and so on. Anyway, I digress. The early romantics used Beethoven as their poster boy for their anti-rational movement and all that. Anyway, I'm rehashing a lot of stuff that I didn't mean to rehash. In 2012, 2013, I was taking a course on Beethoven's piano sonatas. And primarily, if you're curious, I was listening to a lot of these recordings by H.J. Lim, the Beethoven Complete Piano Sonatas. They are divine. I highly recommend them. And I've mentioned this before as well, that when I read Wuthering Heights, and I've read it like 4 or 5 times, I hear Beethoven. And I came across an epiphany of sorts, which I have mentioned in another video, so I'm sorry to repeat myself again. But it wasn't a goth lit video. It was just some random, some random monthly update. Isn't this cover beautiful, by the way? And this is so Beethoven, right? This is so Beethoven to me. So I was questioning, why is it that I can reread this novel again and again and not tire of it? And every time I put it down, I find myself wanting to pick it back up again. What is it that makes it so rereadable? Well, it's a work of genius. There's many reasons. But I was reading a little bit about Emily Bronte, and I came across something last year that was unknown to me. So it wasn't uncommon during Emily Bronte's time for women of a certain social class to have training in arts such as music. But apparently Emily had a genius talent for music. So much so that she even taught music for a time. She was extremely proficient on the keys. And that's when it hit me. I was like, aha, that's why Wuthering Heights is so rereadable. In my opinion, I could be wrong, but I really think that she used her genius and knowledge of musical form, the classical form, in the structuring of her novel. Because, you know, when you hear a piece of music that you love, do you say to yourself, you know, that was enough, I don't ever have to hear that again? No. No, you listen to it over and over and over again. And I hear Beethoven. I definitely hear Beethoven while reading Wuthering Heights. So anyway, those are my closing notes, and I'm not going to go on about this anymore. It might come up again at some point, but I'm sure I'll never be done with talking about Beethoven and the Romantics and the Gothic. All right. Thank you for bearing with me. Take care. Bye.